What's going on, electricians? Let's answer a junction box sizing question that you very well might see on your licensing exam, straight out of my book, A Comprehensive Guide. The question reads, a box has two 4-inch EMT raceways entering the left side of the box, a 3-inch EMT raceway entering the bottom, and a 2-inch EMT raceway entering the right side of the box. There is a straight pull from left to right and an angle pull from left down. What are the minimum dimensions of this box? Before somebody comments it, I understand this isn't a realistic scenario that you might see in the field. I mean, you could, but it's not really that realistic. And I get that, but the exam is not meant to be realistic. The exam is not meant to be what you're going to see in the field, but what does your code knowledge look like to answer this question? And the licensing exam question is always going to ask, what are the minimum dimensions of this box? Okay, again, in the field, you can install a very large box and it'll probably be code compliant, but what are the minimum dimensions of this box? To answer this question, you need to be familiar with the code article 314.28, where it talks about straight pulls and angle pulls. Okay, if you turn there, let's start with the straight pull. So when it's talking about straight pulls, it's talking about whatever dimension that straight pull is in. So if it's from left to right, the math that we do based on the code is going to be that horizontal dimension. So straight pulls will say that that dimension shall not be less than 8 times the largest conduit. What's the largest conduit in that straight pull? 4 inches. So 4, and I'm going to get 32 inches, again, for that horizontal dimension. That is the minimum width of this box. However, let's remember that there is an angle pull in this dimension as well. So for angle pulls, it gives us a different calculation. So you should be asking, okay, so if it comes to two different numbers, which math should I do? So before we get into that, let's do the angle pull math. So when you look at angle pulls, it'll say in angle pulls, from where the conduit enters, here's where this conduit is entering, from where the conduit enters to the opposite wall. Okay, so as you can see, we're talking about the horizontal dimension right now, and we're dealing with the 4-inch conduit. We're dealing with the horizontal dimension. From where the conduit enters to the opposite wall, that dimension shall not be less than 6 times the largest conduit in that pull on that wall, and then you need to add the remaining conduit on that wall. Okay, so I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to do the math at the same time. So that horizontal dimension shall not be less than 6 times the largest conduit of that pull on that wall, which is 4, which gives me 24. And then it says, then you need to add the remaining conduits on that wall. So 24 plus 4 equals 28. So I'm getting 28 inches. So again, this is the horizontal dimension. So you should be asking, hold on, do I pick the 28 or do I pick the 32? So when it comes to your calculations, you always pick the largest number, and that's the minimum dimension of the minimum width of that dimension. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? So I know that my width has to be at least 32 inches. I'm confident that that's my final answer. But now we need to figure out what the vertical dimension is. There is no straight pull there. We only have this angle pull. And it says from where the conduit enters to that opposite wall, okay, so 3 inches going up, so we're talking the vertical dimension, shall not be less than 6 times the largest conduit on that wall of that pull, which is 3. So I'm going to write 6 times 3, that's going to give me 18, plus the width of the remaining conduits on that wall. There are no remaining conduits, so my vertical dimension, I am confident, is going to be 18 inches. So I believe my answer is going to be a 32 by 18. If I look at my options, I see C is 32 by 18. Let me just double check that here. And would you look at that, 32 by 18. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. I know I wasn't walking you through the exact code article so that you can literally see verbatim what I'm talking about, but I encourage you, open up your code books to article 314.28, double check that I did this correctly, but this is how I teach junction box sizing, and something like this might show up on your licensing exam, so you need to be prepared. Hopefully you learned something. Comment down below if you liked it. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it, but I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks.